one thing, when you give near-death experience stories, some people will say, oh, they just make them up. So one counter-argument to that is that counterfeit money is only valid on the basis of genuine currency. So they say there are many bogus gurus. They can only be bogus gurus if there are genuine gurus, just like counterfeit money only has value because it's imitating genuine currency. So near-death experiences are something that have been deeply studied, and there are hot debate. There are actually people who were atheists, and they follow reductive materialism, meaning everything is ultimately just dead matter, inert. And they've had near-death experiences and completely changed. Very interesting. There's many books that have been published on this, and there are neurosurgeons, MDs, very educated, peer-reviewed journals, things like that. Very educated people. And so it's not just like woo-woo, like people like to call pseudoscience. But that's why I'm saying in the beginning, Krishna doesn't bother arguing so much. He's just saying, you want to hear from me? This is what I'm telling you. Then you can argue afterwards, debate on your own time. So there's near-death experiences. There are also shared death experiences. That's another thing. If you're close to somebody who is leaving and you're spending a lot of time with them, there's experiences where, and you're very sad for them. There's stories that you both have out-of-body experiences. So that's one of the examples they give to say that, because a lot of people say, I'll give you the con for it. A lot of people say near-death experiences, they're just like there's lack of oxygen in the brain, chemical imbalance, or like it's a brain spasm, the final, when the flame's going out, the candle's going out, the final burst, brain burst. But then what about the shared death experiences for someone who is healthy, not dying, but with a loved one who's leaving, or someone who is, not even necessarily a loved one, and they have a shared death experience of a very peaceful state or different experiences, and then that person dies. So that's something interesting to study also, shared death experiences. Now, near-death experiences, there's tons of them, but I'll just give you a couple really interesting ones, and the idea behind it. So the idea is that they want to test that even when you're in kind of an anorexic, like if you're taking some anesthesia, you can still have some kind of conscious experience. So what they do, and we'll just tell a few interesting ones, where they test it, that it happened when there's zero brain function going on. It's a very interesting thing. So what they did is, because otherwise they say, well, maybe, their eyes were closed, it seemed like they were in a coma, but still they're able to kind of get some subtle perception of the environment. And so, because there's so many stories where they have like an out-of-body thing and they're looking down at them, and they kind of, they can tell later on what the surgeons were doing. So there's so many stories like that. But then what they did is they want to verify them more. So one of the things they do, because there's many amazing kind of things, we went to this beautiful plane, we had these discussions with like this divine creatures, blah, blah, blah. But how they verify it is by like evidence that happened in like the operating room or somewhere in the hospital. So there was one lady, they took her body down to like 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Basically, the body operates in, the 90s. So they did that because she had a brain thing that was going to burst and kill her if it was, they had to basically take her out completely, so that when they removed the blood, they drained her whole head of blood. So that's why they had to freeze her, basically. They had to really bring her temperature down. And then they had to operate. And so that way the cells deprived of oxygen, they could be rebooted. They wouldn't, die in that time without oxygen, because normally it only takes a few minutes. So while she was under like that, she had no brain function. And to verify it, they put in little speakers in her ears that were blasting 100 decibel sound, which is very loud. 100 decibel is like, kind of like, Radhakunj. It's like a hammer, So that was constantly pinging in her ears. And then they had that connected to a brain kind of, to see what kind of areas were being activated, to see that, that she was actually completely out. There was no brain signals going on whatsoever. And that time while she was out, she had a near-death experience. And it wasn't like they were even planning on this. When she came out, she described her near-death experience. She described what tools they were using. She described the room. She described what song was playing while they were operating, Hotel California. And they were astonished. So this is one of the stories. Another story, there was a lady who was a migrant worker. I believe her name was Marie. And she had a cardiac arrest while she was being operated on, and she was being brought back. Afterwards, she had a near-death experience. Afterwards, she described that she had floated up outside the hospital building, some floors up, and on the third floor ledge, on the inside of the window, she saw a tennis shoe. And she described in detail the tennis shoe. And so after, when she came back, they went and checked, and it was exactly as she described it. So they're thinking, that's very strange. So this is just a couple examples. There's stories of, there's so many stories. There's another story of a man who was old, but his heart had stopped, and his brain was officially dead for like 5 minutes or so. And during that time, he had such an experience, he was able to describe in great detail everything that had occurred. So things like that, the idea of the body is a vehicle for the soul, and when that body becomes no longer able to hold the soul, or the karma is finished, then we go out. So the idea is that the soul is not merely a product of the brain or the mind. The mind is not just matter, in other words, it is something immaterial. So Krishna also talks about these ideas going forward, and it's important for us to learn and understand that it's not just, a philosophy, it's actually something real, that there is something beyond just this body that made of flesh and neurons and all these networks, which are very amazing, but there's something that there's an operating system in the hardware. And if the hardware becomes corrupt generally, so that's why we say, people may argue, okay, well, if the soul is different from the body, why when you take intoxication, the consciousness becomes cloudy? These things do affect because the soul is in the body, it's embodied. And Krishna said, we went over this verse, that the soul pervades the body. We didn't get into this so much, but we'll end with this. The body is called the Kshetra, the field of experience. And the soul is the Kshetra Gya, the knower of the field. The difference between the soul and God is that God is the knower of all fields. His field is everything, Kshetra. And he is the knower, Kshetra Gya, of everything. For us, it's this body and our limited environment. We are the knower of that. We are Anu Chaitanya, finite consciousness, while God is infinite consciousness. So Krishna knows what we are all. People say, how does God know what we are doing? Because he is Paramatma. He is the super soul, and we are all part and parcel of him. So you can say, does a tree know if a leaf is being taken off? The tree or the earth, they are super conscious. So it's not that we are part and parcel of Krishna. He is also aware of that entire field. Doesn't mean, at the same time, Krishna says, I'm completely aloof from it in my own abode. Everything is strung upon me like pearls upon a thread, and yet I am completely separate at the same time. So we're going to learn this verse tomorrow. There's so many interesting stories we can talk about, near-death experiences, so many other interesting things. Tomorrow I want to tell, we'll talk about it tomorrow. I don't want to give it away, but we'll stop here. Vanchakalpatarubhyasya kripasindhavevcha patitanang pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Any questions, any discussion, any points?
Surviving Death on Netflix.
Okay.
If you want to have a whole thing about many near-death experiences, you get into the science of a few anecdotes. It's cool.
It's a debated topic, and there's lots of scientists. There's a whole, scientists and surgeons and doctors that are all kind of following this. And they're not all religious people at first. Some of them were atheists, and they later changed. So it's not just religious people who get degrees and later try to prove their religion.
A lot of people who have it, who've had the experience, they have support groups because they can't tell nobody believes the profundity of their experience. So they need to talk to people who understand that this is no joke. It's their whole world changes after.
You can actually do, if you learn how to do astral traveling, it's kind of like out-of-body experience. I've had those. A lot of people have had those, where the idea is that even when you sleep, it's actually why the most susceptible time to demons actually is the in-between between waking and sleeping. And then sometimes, at that time, it's the subtle body comes out from the umbilical cord and hovers above the body, and then it can travel around and experience waking dreams. And I've had those, very interesting. And you can do it through meditative practices, you can do astral projection, and you can even see what is happening in different areas if you learn how to control that. Yogis can control that, and they can travel here and there and see what is going on. And Guru and Vaishnavas are the most powerful at that, actually. All the yogic siddhis are serving them. It's not that they're even like practicing this, it's just that they can have their soul, the consciousness, go to another country and see what the devotees are doing. They can see the Radha Krishna's associates. When we are performing festivals here, they can see, oh, that's the whole idea of the devas. Go ahead.
Srila Maharaj says he's eating.
Yes.
What was that?
There's a beautiful story of Srila Vaman Goswami Maharaj, who had a few house programs to go to, and his sevak was telling him, no, there's no time, we can't go to this one, we can't go to this one. These devotees were praying for him to come for the whole year. So he, at that point, he didn't say anything, but he was very quiet for some time, and he went on the train journey and everything. But then, sometime later, I believe they brought some prasad, or they brought news, and that family had said, oh, he was there with us, it was such a wonderful program, great festival, it was so amazing. The sevak was thinking, how is it possible? He was here the whole time. They said, no, here's his prasadam, we had this program, he took rest in the afternoon, we massaged his feet, we did his Charnamrita Abhishek. So when Vaman Goswami Maharaj was more elderly, and he was only doing bhajan, he was not speaking with anyone, very little even, and he would take very little food. They were saying, please eat more, eat more. He said, what can I do? I'm being offered by so many devotees all over, and therefore I have to take a little also here. Because I'm taking so many places. And later on they were saying, take more, talk more. You were saying, what do you want me to follow Thakurani's instructions, Radharani's, or your instructions? So the spirit, transcendental associates of Krishna are like that. They're on a much higher plane. So interesting things to hear. Yes, you can research this, and it's very interesting. It's a very interesting field. Out-of-body experiences. Even that is actually not a true out-of-body experience. It's a subtle body experience. So that's again why people are kind of stuck on these low, like Gita is giving such a high knowledge. The out-of-body experience is you're in a different kind of subtle body. It's still a body. You're still thinking, I am this person there. This ego is still kind of keeping you in that idea that, oh, that is me, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I am of this place, that place, these are my experiences, these are my ideas. Now, out-of-body experience, you can go to a higher realm and kind of snap out of that idea. And that's why you meet a lot of people who've gone through these things. It's a very transformative thing, you know. And similar things happen with people who take psilocybins and things like that. You see realms that before you could not perceive, and then it makes you understand that, you know, one of the things they say, people who have these near-death experiences, they say that higher realm is so much more real than this realm.
The colors, too.
The colors, everything is so vibrant, everything is much more real. We're kind of, our frequencies now, that's why there's so many radio waves, there's so many things going on right now that we can't perceive. And so there's, you know, our Gurudev would say, when we are having Anukut festival, all the devas came. All the demigods came, Brahma came, Vishnu came, Shiva came, Indra came. Everyone came. When we had a program, Gurudev, someone was saying, oh, not so many people came. Gurudev said, no, thousands of people came. All these devas, devis came. So they can perceive that. So we pray to Krishna to have faith in this knowledge, Atma Tattva, and to progress to Buddhi Yoga. Tomorrow we're going to talk about, we'll finish this Atma Tattva section and talk about Buddhi Yoga and an interesting story about the power of Buddhi Yoga. Krishna progresses quickly now. He says that Buddhi Yoga is such a thing that a little bit of this is very valuable. If you do a little bit of the right thing, it's very valuable. There's those moments in life where you do a little bit and it makes everything else meaningful. So we're going to try and learn about how to follow activities in life, how to follow a process in life that is the most valuable thing we can do with our time. Because in Kali Yuga, this age, our time is limited, our intelligence is limited, you know, we're quarrelsome. So try to do the best thing, the essence. And that's what Krishna is going to teach next in the Gita.